5 FM in collaboration with Trinidad All-Stars, celebrating 86 years of musical excellence. From then to now. Join I-95.5 FM every Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. during the month of August as we pay tribute to a steel orchestra that has contributed tremendously to the development of its people in music and culture with some of the greatest steel orchestra hits ever played. Trinidad All-Stars on I-95.5 FM.
The St. Agnes Anglican Church wishes to thank everyone who took part in the grand fundraising raffle, which was drawn on Saturday, 31st July. We would
hesitant for whatever reason, Dr. Vignes will provide the information you need to make an informed choice. Then from 8:30 p.m. on TV6, episode 2 of the Eye on Health series features Dr. Erica Wheeler, PAHO, WHO representative to Trinidad and Tobago, alongside 3 persons with disabilities as they speak about the urgent need for access and inclusion.
Why should we be talking about the rights for persons with disabilities? It's because persons with disabilities are persons too. They have rights just the same as everyone else.
So join us this PAHO Sunday from 6:15 p.m. on Eye on Dependency, live on I-95.5 FM and the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel. And then from 8:30 p.m. catch Eye on Health on TV6, or from 8:45 p.m. on the Eye on Dependency YouTube channel. Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography. philosophy. We don't just share stories, we change lives.
This is Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha. Sundays at 6:15 p.m. on the most influential name in radio, I-95.5 FM.
Good evening and welcome to Eye on Dependency, right here on I-95.5 FM and live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Natasha.
Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago, and as usual, I'm here as well. And Phil is here, Shortman is here, and we are ready to educate once again this evening. Very interesting program, very informative program, and the topic of the day, vaccines.
Indeed. And we have a consultant epidemiologist from PAHO to discuss this very timely and relevant issue with us. But before we get into that, we would like to share with you again in terms of our commitment to ending child labor. We would like to share the Ministry of Labor's video, which pulls together a lot of government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and others who are pledging to do their part to end child labor. So,
after which we take a break and then we come back with a short video again on the myths the myths and that frustrate health officials. This is from out of Sacramento, the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, Johns Hopkins University, where they speak about what vaccine hesitancy is, the frustration that it's causing, and then I'll show you what I saw today at a parts place. And when the government and health officials decide they're going to continue with their measures, people have a problem with it. But you all would not believe what I saw today. And
maybe you've seen it too.
If the Delta variant gets here and we continue to operate like this, we're heading for another lockdown. I'm telling you all straight up right now, prepare for it. Because we cannot be that careless and irresponsible despite what we're seeing going on around the world. Trinidad and Tobago is a real place, but it's a real special place. And the adults I saw perform today, we'll show you that in a while. Let's go to that video. Ministry of Labor.
I pledge to accelerate action in leading the team of government and non-government partners towards the elimination of child labor in Trinidad and Tobago.
The International Labour Organization, Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean reaffirms its commitment to continue to support Trinidad and Tobago to end child labor.
We, the labor inspectors, pledge to protect all children from child labor by ensuring that no child under 16 years is employed.
The Division of Community Development, Enterprise Development and Labor pledges to bring an end to child labor in Tobago by ensuring that the educational and fundamental rights of children in communities are protected.
Children are a heritage. The Counter-Trafficking Unit pledges to preserve our heritage and fight against the worst forms of child labor, including the trafficking of children.
The Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs pledges to end child labor through the development of policies, programs, and initiatives geared to protect our nation's children and enhance their well-being.
Childline pledges to protect children from child labor. We offer counseling and workshop services to children and families We have a 24-hour helpline and a children's app where reports of child labor can be made.
The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services pledges to end child labor in Trinidad and Tobago by providing social assistance and psychosocial support to vulnerable families.
The Ministry of Education pledges to end child labor by ensuring that all children of Trinidad and Tobago have access to their right to an inclusive, equitable, and quality education.
The Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago pledges to end child labor by sensitizing parents and the national community about the rights of children, which include the right to an education, protection from child labor, and the right to an opinion.
OSHA pledges to protect children and young adults from hazardous child labor, thereby ensuring their safety and health and TNT's future.
I pledge to bring an end
to child labor
in Trinidad and Tobago.
I, Minister of Labor, join this chorus and champion this pledge to bring an end to child labor in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Ministry of Labor and all other supporting agencies, Counter-Trafficking Unit and Ministry of National Security for this very important video. I hope you people paying attention. Welcome those of you on YouTube and Facebook. And we ask you, you know someone who's hesitant? Please share the link with them. Let them join the discussion this evening. You have any questions for Dr. Devines, we'll open the lines so that you can call and ask your questions, or you can post them on Facebook or YouTube and we'll get the questions to her. And remember, I want to show you all why we're still in trouble and people not listening. Let's go to a break, and when we return, we will get to that frustration with people who are hesitant still. We'll be back.
You're listening to Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha. Reality radio at its best.
Hello, I am Jason Clark, better known as the Real Chairman. I will be a guest on Eye on Dependency TV series Eye on Health every Sunday from 8:30 p.m. on TV6. Don't miss this important series, as I will be speaking about inclusion and advocacy for persons living with disabilities.
Slavery, a terrible time in our history. The kidnapping, buying and selling of people for profit, the exploitation of another human being. It still exists today. It has a new name: human trafficking. Anyone can be a victim. There is forced labor, sexual exploitation, and domestic servitude. Human trafficking is a worldwide problem and an emerging concern for us here in Trinidad and Tobago. If you know of or suspect human trafficking activity, call the Counter-Trafficking Hotline at 800-4CTU or 800-4288. Human trafficking is a crime. Identify it, report it, stop it. A message from the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security.
COVID-19 Conversations with PAHO.
Your first line of defense is the immune system of your body. Whenever a foreign body comes in like a virus, your own body will make antibodies to try and attack and shut that virus down. That's the first thing that happens. So the stronger your immune system is, the better. That's the whole premise on which vaccines are done. It introduces something into your body that will cause your immune system to generate those antibodies
that will recognize a virus if it comes into your body.
Get the facts. Vaccinate, live. A message from the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization.
I'm Mava, and you listen to Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha on I-95.5 FM, Trinidad and Tobago. Don't be a fool and be a mule. I'm Mava, and you listen to Eye on
Thank you for staying with us, and thank you for joining us on I-95 and Facebook and YouTube to our PAHO Sunday. That's what we're calling it. We have Dr. Franka Vignes, a consultant epidemiologist at PAHO, coming up. But before we go to Dr. Vignes, we have a short video that we'd like to show you that focuses on the COVID-19 myths that still abound. And it kind of explains why some people are hesitant, some of the reasons why some people are hesitant to get vaccinated. And of course, we'll also share with you the video that God spoke about, where people are disregarding the social distancing aspect of the guidelines. They're wearing their masks, yes, but not social distancing, which is one of the three pillars of or guidelines that we all need to abide by, vaccinated or unvaccinated.
Let's go to that video.
Let's go to that.
And those of you on radio, you can listen too, because you will hear what's going on.
Yep.
Since the start of the pandemic, public health officials have battled myths, rumors, misconceptions, and conspiracy theories about COVID-19. Now, a new crop of myths has sprouted about COVID vaccines. Health officials worry that misinformation is keeping some people from getting vaccinated, which they say is the best path out of a pandemic that marches on after more than a year and a half. Here are 4 common myths about the vaccines and what medical professionals say about them. Myth: the vaccines change your DNA. Truth: the vaccines do not affect or interact with your DNA. The mRNA vaccines teach your cells how to build part of the spike protein on the virus, triggering an immune response. But it never enters the part of the cell that contains your DNA. Myth: the vaccines cause infertility. Truth: the COVID-19 vaccine will not affect fertility, health officials say. However, getting COVID-19 can potentially have a serious impact on a pregnancy and the mother's health. Women should discuss concerns with their healthcare providers. Rumor: microchips are being implanted with the vaccine. Truth: nope. This is a widely shared conspiracy theory. The vaccines contain a bit of genetic material encased in surprisingly simple ingredients: salt, fat, and sugar. Myth: I don't need a vaccine because I had COVID and now have natural immunity. Truth: there's not enough information yet about how long people are protected by natural immunity after they get COVID-19. So health officials advise people who have already had the virus to get vaccinated.
So that was a short video on the myths, some of the myths that are preventing people from being vaccinated, and I hope those were dispelled for you. Produced by the Sacramento Bee newspaper with source information from the Missouri Department of Health, Johns Hopkins University as well.
Now, short man, put up those pictures and the short video that I did today so that people can see why we're having this conversation and why we're still in trouble. Look at this, folks. This is our parts place. Now, you all have to understand that business people, most business people in this country, all they care about is money. Right? This is a stone's throw away from a police station. There's a gap between them and a police station. Look where everybody's standing from each other. It took me about
masks, yes, but
they took me about 25 minutes to get, because every time I stood my 6 feet, but from the time someone moved, someone filled that spot. That is not 6 feet as far as I know. right? So you see why we're still in trouble? You see why when Dr. Rowley decided to use the draconian measures.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
and there are markers
there are markers on the ground?
No. They haven't even put markers on the ground.
Business places need to keep up that vigilance too. Have your hand sanitizing stations and have your markers on the ground so people will know where to stand.
There's no hand sanitizer, no markers on the ground, no.
Okay.
So I'm asking myself, how are we going to get out of this quagmire that we're in if adults, these are all adults who are in this place today. How are we going to get out of this if we continue to do this? How? And the way they make the Delta variant song, it seems like it jump from one person to the next. So what, after somebody passed and brushed me today, I get sick. Because I'm saying, what it is wrong with us?
But remember, this virus is airborne. Huh? It travels through droplets that people exchange. So
and the business people, all they're happy with is they put that plastic over behind the sheet. They're safe. They just want the money.
Yes.
Right? But understand too, what about the passing of the money and all of that? And they just taking money and handing back money. They're not sanitizing either. And it's a whole brouhaha that I saw there today. And I am saying that if we continue like this, remember the retail sector is going to reopen. We cannot continue like this, folks. We cannot. Because I'm saying to myself, they're standing each other like 2 inches, 3 inches at best. How are we to beat this virus if we continue to do this?
It can't be vaccines alone.
How? How do we expect to beat this thing? So, folks, this is why we have to have this conversation this evening. All right? And we have on the line Dr. Franka Vignes. Before we do that, let Natasha share Dr. Franka Vignes with you, and you know who we are about to speak with.
Yes, Dr. Franka Vignes holds an MPhil and PhD in infectious disease epidemiology from Yale University and an MSc in microbiology parasitology from Howard University. She has worked in the public sector in the United States to implement and manage several projects leading to successful statewide disease surveillance programs. She served as the deputy director of an NGO, the Alliance for Microbicide Development in Washington, D.C., working with the Gates Foundation and teams in Europe, India, and South Africa. Dr. Vignes has extensive experience leading epidemiology and health research teams in the private sector at an investment bank in New York and more recently at a U.S.-based clinical research organization. In the past, she has worked with PAHO, now CAFA, as an epidemiologist to provide technical assistance to ministries of health with epidemiological outbreak investigations. Moreover, she's participated and/or led country evaluations and assessments of HIV, STI, respiratory illnesses, and arboviral surveillance systems in over 20 countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. And with that, we welcome to Iron Dependency Dr. Franka Vignes.
This is she. Good evening.
Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, all.
We're good. We're hardly hearing you.
Is this any better?
A little bit.
No.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yes, we're hearing you better. So,
okay, that's good.
Dr. Vignes, thank you very much for taking the time out. And of course, as we dub this Sunday, PAHO Sunday, because followed by you will be Dr. Erica Wheeler, who will be on TV6 this evening from 8:30. So you are actually opening the innings here this evening for PAHO.
Wonderful.
So we get right into it, and as we ask the listeners who have any questions, they can post it on Facebook, or when we open the lines, we will take their questions if they have any questions after you're finished. So, Natasha?
Sure. So, Doctor, how generally do vaccines work, and what is the historical record for successful vaccines and vaccination campaigns?
Okay, thanks for that question. To understand how vaccines work, it helps to look at how our bodies fight an illness caused by an infectious agent. So when germs, bacteria, or viruses invade our bodies, they multiply. And this invasion is called the infection. And after the infection, you can then develop symptoms of the disease. So in the context of the current pandemic, the virus SARS-CoV-2 causes the disease COVID-19. And the first time the body encounters the virus, in this example, it can take several days to recover. And after the infection, the immune system remembers how to protect the body against the virus. So that's how it typically works. And vaccines help develop immunity by imitating an infection, but not causing the illness, with some minor symptoms, for example, headaches, like fever, body aches, etc. And the COVID-19 vaccine the vaccines instruct host cells to produce protein of the spike protein, the S antigen. And the known potential benefits of these vaccines that are currently available under emergency use listing, which we can talk more about later, the known benefits outweigh the known potential risks. The second part of your question, you asked about the historical record for successful vaccines, and what would come readily to mind would be smallpox. In 1980, the WHO General Assembly declared smallpox eradicated. And that smallpox vaccines then stopped in the 70s. Another successful vaccination campaign would have been that for polio. Polio is now considered to be eradicated in the Western Hemisphere and occurs only in parts of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So those are two examples of successful vaccine campaigns in the past.
So if the vaccines generally work so well and are generally widely accepted and have proven to work, why do you think some people are on the sidelines waiting to see before taking the COVID-19 vaccines? Or why are they hesitant, do you think?
That's a good question. So generally, for any vaccine, in any vaccination campaign, it is normal to identify potential adverse events following immunization. It does not necessarily mean that all the events are linked to the vaccination, but at the same time, all severe adverse events must be investigated and all safety concerns addressed. Before I answer your question, I want to say that the administration of vaccines is based on a risk versus benefit analysis. And the benefits outweigh the risks, typically when a vaccine has been approved, even for emergency use, because the adverse events are very rare when compared to the risk of severe illness or death for those high-risk subpopulations. And we must always look at the totality of the evidence. So getting closer to answering your question, you're asking why a person's on the sideline. And so we have to understand two things. We have to separate vaccine hesitancy, persons who are hesitant to take the vaccine, specifically COVID-19 vaccine, and those persons who are anti-vaccination or do not believe in vaccines. So those are two different groups. So specifically for persons who might be hesitant to take the vaccine first, it may be because of the adverse events that they've heard around, for example, the AstraZeneca vaccine, which we can get into later. And remember that rare adverse events following immunization should be assessed against the risk of death and severe illness and hospitalization, and the potential of these vaccines to prevent infections and death. So that's one reason, because of the adverse events that they've heard, which are quite rare, and we can get into that a little later. Two simple reasons for persons hesitating to receive vaccines. Some persons have a phobia about needles. It's that simple. Many of us I know one individual who has tried on several occasions to go get vaccinated, but gets quite nervous, cold sweat, gets quite weak, and so therefore has had to leave the vaccination site on other occasions, unable to go. So persons have the phobia of needles. The other thing is some persons have been waiting on a vaccine that's not available within Trinidad and Tobago. You hear some persons speaking about waiting for another vaccine, for a Pfizer or Moderna, I know one friend who was waiting on the Cuban vaccine, for example. So some persons are waiting for vaccines that are not available here, and I would advise those persons to take the vaccines that are available. And then there are also other legitimate concerns around persons with comorbidities, things, non-communicable diseases. Those are diseases that cannot be communicated or transmitted from one person to another. And so things like, we're talking about high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, asthma, for example. And those persons are the persons who should get the vaccine, because if they do get infected, they are at a higher risk for severe illness. So we have persons with NCDs also sitting on the sidelines. There are also some persons waiting until they absolutely have to get the vaccine, if they have to travel, if their jobs or their companies insist they get the vaccine, and as well as to go to school or to university. So I would say to those persons, don't necessarily wait for your company to tell you to go get vaccinated. Vaccines are available free of charge throughout the country at many health centers and at mass vaccination sites. And of course, speaking to the recording you played earlier, I mean, lots of persons are also listening to they're being provided with a lot of misinformation, which is persons providing information that's inaccurate, as well as disinformation, persons intentionally providing poor advice. So I say to those persons who are hesitant, maybe try and find one personal reason that helps you to reconsider. Maybe for an elderly person, an elderly parent, for a child, or just for peace of mind. So, and for those who are anti-vaccine, I don't know how large that group is, because I think in the Caribbean, our record in the Caribbean has been pretty good with respect to the vaccination coverage in the Caribbean. But for those who are anti-vaccine, and I trust that's a very small segment of persons living in the English-speaking Caribbean, but just understand that smallpox has now been eradicated because of vaccination. Polio is near eradication because of vaccination. We have measles, mumps, rubella, tetanus, yellow fever, and diphtheria vaccines. And many of these vaccines, for those who don't believe in vaccines, you've probably been vaccinated with many of these, which are protecting you from severe disease or illness. And so, one of the things we need to keep in mind is that for every vaccine that's been introduced, there's been a campaign against it. I remember reading a few weeks ago something that stated for anti-vaccination movements are as old as vaccines themselves. So we're to expect this. There's always some measure of resistance. And if we think about what drives people to oppose a vaccine, we need to look at what is happening in a country or in a community, in our society, culturally and politically. And this is where you will find your answers.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and on the phone we have Dr. Franka Vignes, consultant epidemiologist at PAHO Caribbean, and she's stationed here in Trinidad. And we, again, want to clear up all your misconceptions and doubts about vaccine. This is what we're doing here this evening. Remember, if you have anyone who you know still hesitant, please share this with them. You can find us on I95.5 FM and Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel. And Doc, we go into variants. Now we have questions. Those two. Lately there's been a lot of discussions about the Delta variant. Now what exactly is it and why is it in the news today?
Yeah, absolutely. So you ask, what is a variant? So when a virus replicates or makes copies of itself, it sometimes changes a little bit. And these changes are called mutations. And a virus with one or several new mutations is referred to as a variant of the original virus. And the more that viruses circulate, the more they change. And some of these mutations can lead to changes in a virus's characteristics, such as altered transmission. It may spread more easily. And the Delta variant has been in the news lately because it is highly transmissible, more transmissible than the original strain. But just note that we need to stop transmission of all variants, not just the Delta variant. So that is, the reason why it's been in the news lately. For those of us who watch a lot of the cable news network or foreign news, you'd see that, I think it's close to over 80% of new infections in the United States is because of the Delta variant. And so because it's more transmissible, it has causing a lot of disease among those who are unvaccinated in the United States specifically.
Then should we be concerned then? All right, there's also the SARS-CoV-2. Will that keep changing as well?
Yeah. So the Delta variant is a variant of SARS-CoV-2. And so it's normal for viruses to change. It's something that that researchers are following because it can have important consequences. So far, hundreds of variations of the SARS-CoV-2 virus have been identified worldwide. And as I mentioned, given the increased transmissibility of some of these variants of concern, it's very important that we continue to practice the public health social measures. So, of course, we have vaccines, but because some of these variants are more highly transmissible, it's important that we continue to practice, the use social distancing, hand washing, mask wearing, etc.
So how then, or what then is PAHO WHO doing to monitor these changes that are occurring with the virus?
Well, since the beginning of the outbreak in last year, WHO is working with a global network of laboratories around the world to support the testing and to increase our level of understanding of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. And there's also, this network is dedicated to, there's a virus evolution working group which aims to detect new mutations quickly. And just so you know as well that PAHO is collaborating with the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, with Professor Christine Carrington in the laboratory that she leads to help strengthen capacity in the sub-region for the identification and the genomic sequencing of viruses. And many of the variants of concern that have been identified in the Caribbean have been identified at the university laboratory here in St. Augustine.
So how are we tackling the new variants now that are emerging? I from what we have heard in the news, it's proving a challenge because it seems as if the vaccines may or may not, I suppose we need more time to figure it out, but the vaccines may or may not be resistant against these variants.
Yeah, well, it's important that we continue to increase the level of sequencing of the viruses and strengthen capacity in the region, and where possible, share the sequence data internationally to help each country monitor and respond to the evolving pandemic, because there will be more and more variants that once we have transmission of the virus, there will be mutations and there will be additional variants. The question is whether, we will have many additional variants of concern, those variants that are more highly transmissible will we have. We don't know. It's an evolving, very fluid situation. But again, what's important is that we increase the level of sequencing that we're doing for the SARS-CoV-2 virus, particularly in the Caribbean, that we strengthen our capacity so we understand which variants are being transmitted and circulating in the Caribbean as well.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are having a very important conversation this evening with Dr. Franka Vignes, consultant epidemiologist at PAHO. And she's really running it down nice. There are people on Facebook who are following, giving their comments, and we appreciate that. Also on YouTube, those of you on radio will get your chance in a while to ask some questions. We're going to take a break, and we'll return with Dr. Franka Vignes. Stay right there.
Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography. On the Eye, 95.5, the most influential name in radio.
COVID-19 Conversations with PAHO.
WHO is a public health agency, a global public health agency that we're part of. So they advise we talk glibly about, wearing a mask, washing your hands and all the rest of it, keeping your physical distance and if, how COVID-19 is spread, the fact that it's a virus, it's not bacteria, all of that sort of thing. That is because we have the knowledge and the evidence, and we are the ones that put together those guidelines.
Get the facts. Vaccinate. Live. A message from the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization.
Hola, my name is Elena. Well, it's actually not my real name. You don't really care, do you? All you care about is want to pay your money to my boss that I look pretty, smell nice, smile for you, and let you have good time, enjoying yourself and doing to me whatever you want to do for the money you paid. What you don't see or know is that I don't get any part of the money you paid. My boss takes all of it. I am forced to work, taking as many clients as my boss tells me to. I am beaten, made to take drugs, and I cannot leave this kind of work on my own. I am a victim of human trafficking. Please, por favor, help me.
I am Jason Clark, better known as the real chairman. I will be a guest on Eye on Dependency TV series Eye on Health every Sunday from 8:30 p.m. on TV6. Don't miss this important series, as I will be speaking about inclusion and advocacy for persons living with disabilities.
Hello, my name is Raquel, a trainee inmate at HMP Drake Hall, Staffordshire, England, and you're listening to Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha. Please, people, don't traffic drugs. The money is all that nice. It's not worth it.
Thank you for staying with us. And I just want to say, Heather, Casimiro out there in Maryland, you're a good backup. You do your thing. You keep... You have very good backup. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And hello from Trinidad and Tobago.
Dr. Devise, there's someone who had a question on Facebook that I think now is a good time to address. Does this vaccine for COVID-19 immunize an individual? Can you consider yourself inoculated if you've taken this vaccine?
So, hi, thanks for that question. I'm not sure what they mean by inoculated if you've taken the vaccine. So what I can say, not understanding the full the scope of that question, is that you are fully protected when you have finished the course of when you've taken 2 of the vaccines. So, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have here the Sinopharm and the AstraZeneca vaccines. Both vaccines require 2 doses. You are considered fully vaccinated, if that's what they mean by inoculated, fully vaccinated 2 weeks after your 2nd dose. So, so I hope that answers the question from the listener.
There's also maybe some misunderstanding between the word vaccine and the word immunize. Are they the same thing or no?
So if you're immunized, so yeah, I think that's probably, so there's a vaccine that we have in those vials. Once those vaccines are using the needles into your arm, you've been considered to be vaccinated or inoculated.
Right.
You are immunized. You have full immunity 2 weeks after your 2nd dose.
Right.
Now, once you've gotten that first vaccine, you've been inoculated the first time, your body will then build immunity. So you are partially immunized, but you will only be fully immunized fully vaccinated, is the term they often use, 2 weeks after your second vaccine.
Right. Well, there's a follow-up question now from the same person.
Yes.
He's asking if I'm inoculated after the second dose, then why am I still susceptible to the virus?
Okay, now that's a very good question. So what he's asking is whether or not after you've had your second vaccine and you're considered to be fully vaccinated, whether you can still get infected.
Yes.
So if you remember, if you look at the clinical studies, people talked about the efficacy of these vaccines. And you would see that there's no vaccine that has a 100% efficacy, right? Whether it's Pfizer, whether it's Moderna, whether it's Johnson & Johnson, Sinopharm, Sinovac, AstraZeneca. No vaccine has 100% efficacy. And so therefore, no vaccine is 100% protective. And as a result, even after you have after you've been fully vaccinated with your second vaccine, it is possible that a small percentage of persons can become infected. Okay? However, the take-home message there is that if you have been fully vaccinated and you become infected, you are more likely to have mild symptoms or even be asymptomatic, and meaning you'd have no symptoms. Mild symptoms or no symptoms. And what has been shown for all of the vaccines that have been received early use listing or early use authorization, it decreases considerably, some by much as 90%, the likelihood of being hospitalized or dying. And that is what I want the take-home message to be to many of our listeners, that the vaccination reduces the probability or likelihood of severe illness, hospitalization, and death.
Now, Doctor, there are a number of, we're hearing of vaccines, and my question is, how many vaccines are in clinical trials currently?
Yeah, so there are quite a few, and as of last Friday, looking at some data, there are over 100 vaccines in clinical development, between 100 and 120, which means clinical development means you're looking at vaccines in phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3 clinical trials. So there are 110 of those vaccines. And then there are also vaccines in what we call preclinical development. So they're being tested in laboratories to look at the effectiveness of the particular intervention or whatever that drug might be against the virus if we're doing experiments in vitro, in the laboratory, in the petri dishes, etc. We call about, not in vivo in people, but in vitro. So there are quite a few vaccines in clinical trials right now. Like I said, between 100 and 120 in clinical development.
The people are worried about the speed at which these vaccines are being developed. Do they have a genuine concern, like compromising safety, because of the speed at which these vaccines are being developed? How safe are they? That's, I think, some of the concerns that people would have too as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. And the thing is that there are many, there's been a lot of money thrown at this particular problem. There's been large financial investments and scientific collaborations around the world, and they're changing how we even develop vaccines. And so the reason why they're able to move so quickly is because with the original, slew of vaccines that have gotten emergency use listing, which is what WHO calls it, or emergency use authorization, which is what the FDA would call it as well, EUA, is that, first of all, there are persons studying coronaviruses. Okay, that's all they do. There are persons who have dedicated their life to studying a virus type. Some people study influenza, some people study coronaviruses, etc. Separate and apart from that, we have persons studying vaccine platforms, mRNA vaccines, for example. And so when this virus emerged in Wuhan in 2019, scientists were ready to use the sequence of the virus to come up with what they thought would be a good target. And they used the mRNA platform, they had the sequencing, etc., to and develop these vaccines. So that's why it happened quickly at the beginning. The other thing is that some clinical trials are evaluating multiple vaccines at the same time. So typically, in a clinical trial, you may have one arm where you have persons who are vaccinated, all right, and you have one with the vaccine that's being tested, and you have another arm where those persons are being unvaccinated. What they're doing now in clinical trials, they'll have the same one arm that's unvaccinated, but they'll have several different arms of persons with using different vaccines. So they're testing, having one control, and using different vaccines in the control arm. So they're actually testing they're evaluating multiple vaccines at the same time. This does not make the studies any less rigorous, okay? And in some instances as well, before they completely finish a phase 1 trial, they will start the phase 2 and overlap. So they're moving things along quickly because we are in a public health emergency and we need to move faster. But just know that there's no compromise. They're not compromising the rigor for these studies.
All right, Doc. We have a very strident conversation happening on Facebook, and we're glad for that. I think there are many differing opinions on both sides, and I think we encourage that conversation to happen. But in terms of the vaccines use in Trinidad and Tobago, could you elaborate a little bit about the emergency use listing and why we are using vaccines that have been listed for emergency use in Trinidad and Tobago?
Absolutely, and I want to just comment on what you just said, that there are two sides. And I don't like to think of us of there being two sides. I think we all want the same thing. In the end, we all want at some point for us to control, stop, and prevent transmission of this virus. So I think we're all on the same side when it comes to that. I think persons might differ as to how we get there. But that being said, your question about early use listing. So what is early use listing? And again, early use listing is a term used by WHO. Persons who live abroad may use the term early use authorization in the United States. And I too would like to say hello to Heather Casimir, who I know quite well. So in the U.S., they use the term early use authorization. And what is early use listing? So there are three things that the WHO would use. First, they assess the safety of the vaccine. Two, the efficacy. Does the vaccine work? And third, they assess whether or not the vaccine can be manufactured in large quantities at a high quality. Okay, so I'll repeat that. They assess safety, one, whether the vaccine works, two, and whether the vaccine can be manufactured in large quantities at high quality. Once those three things are met, they are able to grant early use listing because we do not have the time to wait to determine how long the vaccine will provide protection for. Will it be 8 months, 6 months, 9 months? We don't know. But we are in an emergency, and therefore some vaccines will receive early emergency use authorization or emergency use listing. And just ensure that all the vaccines that have achieved WHO early use listing are highly effective in preventing severe disease and hospitalization. And emergency use listing is also a prerequisite for the COVAX facility vaccine supply. And Dr. Erica Wheeler can tell you everything you need to know about the COVAX facility vaccine supply. Dr. Erica Wheeler is the PAHO WHO representative here in Trinidad and Tobago, and she has been dealing interacting with liaising with the government, Ministry of Health, as well as WHO around the COVAX facility. I hope that answers the question about emergency use listing.
Yes, it does. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency. If you're listening to us live on 95.5 FM, live on the Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel, we welcome you. And as Natasha said, very robust conversation going on Facebook. Dr. Vignes, You can check it out afterwards. After the end of the program, there's a young man. Well, I don't know if he's a young man, but he got a good rest before he came here this evening, and he took out his sword. But I think you should speak for yourself, Roger. She's very convincing, and I thank you very much, however, for joining in the conversation. And for those of you who are just joining us, welcome. Now, Doctor, there are two vaccines in particular, the Sinopharm and AstraZeneca vaccines that we are using. Are they safe?
Well, that's a short question, and my short answer would be yes, they're both safe. They're both safe. And, of course, there's strict protections that are put in place to ensure the safety of all COVID-19 vaccines that have received emergency use listing. Before receiving validation from WHO and national regulatory agencies, as I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 vaccines must undergo rigorous testing in clinical trials to ensure that they meet internationally agreed benchmarks for safety and efficacy. So yes, both vaccines that we currently have available in Trinidad and Tobago, AstraZeneca and the Sinopharm vaccine, are both safe.
There was some controversy in the early stages of the vaccine being rolled out that the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson ones would cause blood clots in people, and there was some speculation that some people in Trinidad and Tobago died because of it. Could you clarify that, that myth for us?
Absolutely, and that's not a myth. I mean, both, let me back up a little bit by saying COVID-19 vaccines, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, have been used to protect and vaccinate millions of persons already, and data is available from both clinical trials. Of course, there's mild to moderate side effects such as fever, muscle, and headaches and soreness, etc. But there have also been reports of very rare but serious cases of blood clots accompanied by low platelet count. So I don't treat patients, but for example, it's called thrombosis with thrombocytopenia. Thrombosis refers to the clots, and thrombocytopenia refers to the low platelet count. So it's called TTS. So again, there have been very rare but serious cases of blood clots accompanied by the TTS, which occurring 3 to about 30 days after vaccination with COVID-19. Again, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. So specifically with respect to let's parse it out a bit. Let's talk about the AstraZeneca vaccine. We're in August. As of last month, middle of last month, the data showed that these symptoms occur in about 4 to 6 persons out of every million vaccinated. So you're looking to 4 to 6 out of every 1 million persons vaccinated with this rare outcome. And what they found as well is that younger adults appear to be at higher risk than older adults. Okay? Now, of course, more research is underway to understand more about how people may be differently affected. With respect to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, in May of this year, May 2021, the FDA, together with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, had reviewed 28 reports as of May. There could have been more since May because we're in August, but as of first week in May, the U.S. FDA and the Centers for Disease Control, people called CDC, reviewed 28 reports out of more than 8 million persons vaccinated. So 28 of these reports for 8 million persons vaccinated. And if my math is correct, that's about 4 persons for every million persons vaccinated. So it's very rare, right? TTS is very rare among vaccinated, but it's real. It has occurred. Okay, so we're being very transparent. But again, note that blood clotting, if you remember in the early last year, is also a common health problem caused by many health factors. So not all clots that occur after vaccination with AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson will be due to TTS. Some of them may not. But those are the numbers that we have so far. And you may also know that the risk of blood clots is also a complication found in persons who have been infected with COVID-19 as well. So again, you have the benefits and the risks. Okay, in public health, that's what we're trying to do, reduce the risk. Where, people may ask you to stop smoking to reduce the risk of lung cancer, etc. So the benefits of the COVID-19 AstraZeneca and the Johnson vaccines are far greater than the very small risk of TTS, of the blood clots, as well as protecting you from severe disease and death due to COVID-19. Being vaccinated can also protect you against what persons are calling post-COVID syndrome or long COVID. Of course, we're too early in the pandemic to fully understand what those risks might be. So I hope that I've answered your questions about the blood clots. And you do remember that when these clots were discussed in the U.S., they pulled Johnson & Johnson for a while. As you may remember that. That was very transparent. They found an issue, they pulled the vaccine, and that's what they should have done. And that's what you must do when you discover an adverse event. And however, when they realized that it was rare, it was then brought back on, and persons have been taking it since then. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. I do have a follow-up though, and I'm glad you mentioned long COVID. So I have one of the listeners has a question about long COVID. So the risk of blood clots, of course, having taken the vaccine is minimal, as you mentioned. But does this mean that persons who have NCDs that involve heart issues, are they at risk of dying from a blood clot in general if they get COVID or if they get vaccinated? Would you advise that they consult with their physician before taking the vaccine, still just to give them that extra measure of comfort?
A peace of mind, absolutely. I think that, as we know, yes, absolutely, the answer to that is yes. Persons should consult with their doctors if they have concerns about taking the vaccine. But remember, too, that persons who have NCDs, these non-communicable diseases, are at higher risk for severe illness if they do become infected. And so they are a priority group. You may remember that earlier clock with when the rollout of the vaccines here, specifically in Trinidad and Tobago, and I do not speak for the Ministry of Health, nor do I speak for the government of Trinidad and Tobago, but I recall that that persons with NCDs were made a priority by the Ministry of Health. And as you know as well, as we often see when they announce the numbers a couple of times a week, and they mention persons who have unfortunately succumbed to COVID-19, many persons have comorbidities. They don't list which ones, but my understanding that ones that are very common are hypertension. Circulatory heart disease. Sorry about that. So yes, persons with NCDs are high priority, and yes, they should consult their physician.
One of our Shari on Facebook said she took her vaccine a few months ago and she's doing fine. For those who get vaccinated, what side effects should they expect from having taken the vaccine?
Right. So I mean, I've had the vaccine, and I was fortunate not to have any side effects, but many persons have them. My 82-year-old mother had the vaccine, and so did my elderly aunts and uncles. So typically, you can expect to have soreness at the site of the injection, at the injection site. You can expect some persons have a headache, a dull headache for a day or two. Some persons develop a low-grade fever. Some people have complained of back pain and muscle pain or joint pain. And these symptoms usually resolve over a couple of days, over 24 to 72 hours. So those are the types of symptoms that persons typically experience after being vaccinated.
All right. If we can just pause to address the question about long COVID. Do we have enough information now to say exactly what the long-term effects of COVID-19 will be for persons who are vaccinated and unvaccinated?
That's a good question. I think in asking the question, you've answered the question. Do we have enough information? The answer is no. I mean, the information is still limited. And, for persons who may have developed or recovered from COVID, we're now in mid-August 2021. Persons who may have recovered, say, last year, would have been recovered for about a year. Is it for this long COVID or post-COVID syndrome? Is this a syndrome that will occur only for a year after they've recovered? 2 years, 3 years? We don't know. There's more. We know so little. It's a new disease. We're studying the epidemiology of the disease, and it will take years to fully understand what the particular outcome might be for persons who have had COVID-19. I know I've seen in what I've read so far, persons who've recovered complain of fatigue. I know one person who has had COVID and who, from my perspective, was quite healthy, someone who would go running, etc. And 6 months after, this person was hospitalized and quite ill, still has problems speaking for long periods of time on the phone. So, and other persons have had COVID-19 and are just fine and gone about their business. So there may be some underlying factors that may predispose some persons to have long-term, sequelae, long-term symptoms, and some persons not. And again, time will tell. And only when the research is done over many months and probably years, then we'll be able to better understand what the long-term effects are after having had a COVID-19 infection.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are live on the Dependency Facebook page, YouTube channel, of course, on I95.5 FM. On the phone, we are speaking with Dr. Franka Vignes, consultant epidemiologist with PAHO, and she's taking us through the steps. So far, so good. There are a number of naysayers, Doctor, and I know you expect that to happen still. And I hope that at some point in time you can go back to our Facebook page and have someone on your team answer some of these questions that are being posted here, because we are not qualified to answer. We are just hosting this discussion and information sharing program this evening, and we are happy to have you. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we just have a couple more questions, and then, of course, we're going to show you again what I saw today at that Pat's place, and have the doctor, beg people again to observe the protocols. And we have the third place entry winner of the Civilian Conservation Corps. You remember they had a spoken word competition, the counter trafficking, hosted by the counter trafficking unit, put on by the counter trafficking unit, and so we're going to, that's from this central region of the Civilian Conservation Corps. So we have lots to share with you, and we'll be back right after this break.
This is reality radio at its best. Dependency on I95.5 FM.
Boy. I feel I'm gonna buy myself a señorita tonight.
Nah. You know you might be promoting slavery.
Slavery? Mm-hmm. What are you talking about?
Hey, modern day slavery or human trafficking is just what some of these people just do. You know, some of these women were tricked to come here. Some are held against their will, abused, and even beaten. Most times the girls don't even see any of the money that is paid for them. And every night, they just have to come out looking nice and sexy for somebody like you. Human trafficking is a serious problem and a serious crime. Persons who solicit commercial sex services may be contributing to human trafficking. A message from the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security.
I am Jason Clark, better known as the real chairman. I will be a guest on Dependency TV series Eye on Health every Sunday from 8:30 p.m. on TV6. Don't miss this important series, as I will be speaking about inclusion and advocacy for persons living with disabilities.
COVID-19 Conversations with PAHO.
Because we're going to be vaccinating a small portion to begin with, every country, we are going to be having vaccines for about 20% of the country to begin with. means 80% will not get vaccinated immediately. So still, the vaccine is not going to be a magic shot that is suddenly going to allow us to shut everything else down and have carnival. No, that's not going to happen. Not right away. It's going to take time. It's going to be a phased approach. After one set of priority people, we'll have to look at the next set. So all of that, the ministries are working out.
Get the facts. Vaccinate, live. A message from the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization.
Hi, I'm Danielle and you're listening to Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography, Trinidad and Tobago. Don't traffic drugs, it's not worth it.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Eye on Dependency, and thank you for staying with us on I-95.5 FM and the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel. On the line, we have Dr. Franka de Vignes. She's a consultant epidemiologist with PAHO, WHO, and she is explaining this whole vaccine story with COVID-19 and doing a good job so far, I think. Doc, how are you feeling about
pretty good, actually. I think it's great to share accurate information with those listening. I think many persons have questions and legitimate concerns.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, we call some of these concerns myths, but, sometimes, they're genuine concerns and they need to be addressed.
Yep.
And one of the things I was thinking is that, in vaccine campaigns, because this is what it is we're having globally now, must address the issue of trust between those giving the vaccine
Yes.
and those receiving the vaccine.
Yes.
We can't just run with logistics. So like a person like me, I'm an epidemiologist, so I love numbers. So I want to hear how many new cases there have been. I want to hear what's the percentage positivity in terms of, as a percentage of all those tested. I want to know how many beds, what percentage of beds hospital beds are empty, because those are all indicators as to whether the rate of transmission is increasing, decreasing, remaining about the same. But not everyone responds to that, okay? Not everyone responds to the logistics and the numbers. And, we can say over and over again, why aren't people getting the vaccine? They have legitimate concerns. And it's about the messaging. We have to really try and understand the reasons persons choose to not get vaccinated. And I'm talking about those who are hesitant. And they have real concerns, and we have to be able to listen to them and to those individuals, better understand their questions and their concerns, and not judge persons. I think we've become, a lot of that is happening. And I think people come armed with, I'm on this side, I'm on the vaccination side or the anti-vaccination side, and, I have my rights, they can't tell me what to do. I can't force me to be vaccinated. Or you have persons who are vaccinated, who want nothing to do with persons who are unvaccinated. So I don't think that sometimes that stance is useful or helpful. I think we all have to understand where each one of us is coming from in terms of, our experiences in the past and what our approach is and our understanding of the information being shared. So I think it's best for us to, like I said, we all want the same thing. At the end of the day, we would love life to get back to normal. But I think that we have to ensure that our discourse and our discussions with one another is respectful, and that we ensure that get at the heart of the matter to understand each other's fears and concerns.
Appreciate you, Doctor.
Well said.
Well said. But let's I have another question.
Yeah.
Now, there are some concerns with people as well about getting vaccinated. Can someone vaccinated against COVID-19 still get infected?
Right. Yeah. And I think we addressed that, but that's a good question, and we can address it again. Is it possible for someone to be vaccinated to still get COVID-19? So then there's several scenarios, right? So today is Sunday. So let's say, for example,
On Friday, I went about my business in Port of Spain, and I may have gotten infected, not knowing that I was infected. Today is Sunday. I went out to the paddock at Queen's Park Savannah and got vaccinated. In a couple of days, I would come down with some symptoms and then become infected. So I would have been vaccinated and yet became infected because I had my first vaccine and had not yet developed full immunity. Okay? So, and then there's the instance of someone who would have been fully vaccinated, meaning they would have had 2 vaccines in the context of the vaccines available in Trinidad and Tobago, Sinopharm and AZ. I would have had my 2 vaccines, and 2 weeks after having my second vaccine, I should be fully immunized, right? But however, remember, from the efficacy data shared with all of these studies, the efficacy of these vaccines is not 100%. So there is a possibility, a small one, that yes, I can become infected even after being fully vaccinated. Okay. However, what is the evidence is now bearing out is that for those persons who are fully vaccinated, meaning 2 weeks after your second vaccine, you are likely to have mild symptoms or be asymptomatic, and likelihood of being hospitalized is extremely low. So that's something I think the take-home message for many of us. So yes, it's possible for someone who's vaccinated to get infected. That's, we want to be transparent. However, the probability is extremely low.
All right. Someone was asking this question online as well. Is it safe for pregnant women, those planning to become pregnant, or breastfeeding mothers to receive any of these COVID-19 vaccines?
Right. So there are policy guidelines that WHO would put out. So I'm going to answer that question in the context of this is a show being, it is in Trinidad and Tobago. So in terms of the policy here in Trinidad and Tobago, pregnant women are not vaccinated. Okay, I want to be very clear. Pregnant women are not vaccinated in Trinidad and Tobago. So that is doesn't really matter here in Trinidad and Tobago. However, in other countries, they have other policies. Okay, just so you know, that not in Trinidad, in other countries. And so overall, in some countries, they recommend that pregnant women be vaccinated if, and I'll say this again, that pregnant women be vaccinated if they are in a high-risk group and depending on where they live. So, for example, if a pregnant woman may have suffer from a comorbidity, for example, and that pregnant woman may be obese, and that pregnant woman is in an environment where there's high transmission of the virus, her doctor may suggest she get the vaccine. Okay? Again, I guess that's policy. And so in Trinidad and Tobago, pregnant women are not vaccinated. So that's a non-issue here in Trinidad and Tobago. With respect to the WHO also does not recommend discontinuation of breastfeeding after vaccination. But again, we would need more evidence will continue to be sought in order to further inform WHO's policy recommendations on this subject. So it's ongoing. So in other words, pregnant women in Trinidad and Tobago are not vaccinated, so that's not an issue here in Trinidad and Tobago.
With any vaccine?
Well, I wouldn't say any vaccine. I talk specifically.
But definitely not COVID-19.
Yeah, in the context of COVID-19, absolutely.
Okay.
And, I've discovered in the last couple of weeks that the Ministry of Health has an excellent website. I was just looking up what vaccines are required in childhood vaccinations, etc. I haven't committed them to memory, but I was looking at that, and all the information is right there on the Ministry of Health website around which vaccines are required, etc.
Yep. Doc, what about heart inflammation from mRNA COVID-19 vaccines like Pfizer that we've been hearing about?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so Pfizer is not yet available in Trinidad and Tobago. I know I've heard that doses of the Pfizer vaccine may come in. We're in August or September. And my understanding is that when and if these Pfizer vaccines arrive, that they will be used solely for school children, so that I lost my train of thought. So they would be used solely for school children. Okay, but so in terms of the risk, as I mentioned, there's no medical intervention without risk. And so people often say, they want the Pfizer vaccine, but what they found is that there have been very rare reports of what they call myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle, and also what they call pericarditis, inflammation of the membrane surrounding the heart. Anyway, following the second dose of mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. And these cases of myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle, and inflammation of the membrane surrounding the heart have been reported in younger men aged about 12 to 30 or so, 12 to 29. And what they're finding is that there are about 40 cases of myocarditis per 1 million second doses, right, compared to females where there are 4.2 cases per million second doses. So there's quite a difference. So that is the risk with the mRNA vaccines, and I'm sure when and if Pfizer gets here, that will be a topic of discussion here as well. So that is, of course, the risk is low comparatively, and so persons will have to make those decisions around vaccinating their teenagers. But again, the risk, the benefits outweigh the risk.
All right. A couple of questions before we go to the last two. Someone is asking, how are the variants detected?
Okay, how are variants detected? So variants are detected by sequencing the viral genome. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we were talking a bit about mutations and variants, for example. So, the virus replicates, it makes copies of itself, and sometimes these changes are called mutations. And how do you pick up these mutations? You have to sequence the virus. And as I mentioned earlier, there are laboratories in the Caribbean, specifically here at the University of the West Indies, a laboratory run under the leadership of Dr. Christy Carrington, and they do genomic sequencing of these viruses right here in Trinidad and Tobago. And so to answer the question, the variants are picked up and detected by sequencing the samples and the viruses that we are able to isolate. Again, not every person who becomes ill or develops COVID-19 disease, the samples are not sequenced from everyone. We couldn't do that. We don't have the capacity. And I think that they're working to sequence, I think a certain percentage of persons who are hospitalized so they can determine, which variants would be causing severe disease in the region. And note that at the University of the West Indies, they work closely with CARFA, and so they're sequencing the genomes for not only Trinidad and Tobago, it's a sub-regional effort. So they are sequencing samples from all CARFA member countries.
All right. One final one before I let Garth jump in. He's very eager to. Can the PCR test, or how does the PCR test diagnose someone with COVID?
Okay. So you take a PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction, PCR, and it's simply a process to amplify the virus in this instance. So if you're sick, for example, if you think you have a couple of symptoms, you go to the laboratory or wherever you go to get tested. They use the swab. They take a sample. They put it in a plastic bag for those of you who've been tested when you come into the country or when you go for a test. Then they would then put that in a solution, extract the virus, if it exists, and then they'll put it through a test. They'll use something called a primer, taking me back to my graduate school of microbiology days. They'll use a primer that would be used to amplify. And so what they're going to do actually is use PCR to amplify. Remember, you have a small sample that you got from your nostrils, and they're going to use that PCR test, polymerase chain reaction, to create many, many, many millions of copies of of a particular segment of the virus. And once that's done, they then do something else, run it in a gel, and then they can see whether or not, they have negative controls as well, and then they can determine whether or not you are positive. I don't think I did such a great job on that one, but PCR is used to amplify the virus, and then they can detect it, in short.
Okay, Doctor, thank you very much. You did a good job. I understood, and I'm sure others who are listening, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with Dr. Franka Vignes, consultant epidemiologist at PAHO, and we are speaking about vaccines. Those of you who are still hesitant, I think the doctor has been doing a fine job educating us on it. And before we take your calls, we have just a couple more questions. Why do we still have to wear masks, Doc, after getting vaccinated? Because that's another frustrating piece of apparel that we have to now add to our wardrobe.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember yesterday I was walking around the house with my mask on, and I was home alone. And I was wearing my mask for about an hour, and I looked in the mirror and realized I had my mask on. And it's unfortunate that we've gotten so used to wearing a mask. I didn't realize it was on.
Yes, I tend to do that as well in the car so that I don't forget. As soon as I get into the car, I put on my mask. So
yeah, that's kind of special.
I don't forget to put it on when I'm leaving the car.
But why do we still have to wear it even though we get vaccinated?
Absolutely. So vaccines are, of course, a game-changing tool. You want to know why you still have to wear it after being vaccinated. Is that the question? Or why you have to wear your mask, period?
Yes, and why we have to even though we got vaccinated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So why we still need to be cautious after vaccination. So while COVID, the vaccine, is effective against serious illness and death and hospitalization, we are still learning about the ability of the vaccine to protect us from getting infected. That was a question that was asked earlier. So we're still learning about the ability of the virus to protect us from getting infected and passing the virus on to others. So it's one thing, you're fully vaccinated. If you do become infected, you may more than likely have a mild or asymptomatic infection. However, you can still probably spread it to others. So we're still learning about the transmission dynamics. And so therefore, while the vaccination rollout is continuing in our communities, we should continue to practice all of the social, public health, social measures, and that includes wearing the mask, washing hands, social distancing, making sure we have good ventilation, etc. So unfortunately, we don't get away from wearing the mask right now. I think it's in our best interest to continue wearing the mask until we better understand the transmission dynamics.
Right. Doctor,
I want to open the lines now.
No, but before we do that though, Doc, I really, okay, Beverly wanted to find out about, you recommended the Ministry of Health website, but you wanted to find out where can you go really to check on what to expect on the side effects of after taking a vaccine. Does PAHO provide that information as well?
Yes, typically I would go to, I guess I'm a bit biased, but typically I go to the PAHO WHO website about side effects. Of course, all of the vaccines that are currently have early use listing or early use authorization, you can also go directly sometimes to the Pfizer website for those of you in the U.S. or the Moderna website or the AstraZeneca company website. The side effects are listed there. For those who want to see the product inserts, you can go to the company website. For general information, you can go to the PAHO and WHO websites, of course. I go there a couple times a day, every day. So I would recommend going there as well. And I think it's really, there's so much information out there. They call it, we have a pandemic, but they also call it an infodemic, right? There's an epidemic of information everywhere. I mean, from on a social media, on every website, even if they're not website not specifically focusing on public health. So there's so much information, and it's so difficult to discern what's real and what's not, and what's accurate. And it's really important that we I ask persons, please do your research, but at the same time, be careful about what you share. Sometimes we receive information and we know it's not accurate, but we share it with our friends to get a good laugh. But you know what? Someone's going to get that and believe it.
Yeah, and people get upset when you ask them, so where did you get this? Who made this video? Who are these people? You know, they get upset with you for asking those questions, but you know, you have to do your due diligence and ensure that the information you're getting is from a reliable source.
And this pandemic has spawned a lot of Facebook scientists too as well.
And WhatsApp
scientists. So, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Dr. You know, on August 12th, we observe International Youth Day as well. So, Shortman, we're going to go to that video D. This is the third place winner of the spoken word competition. When we come back from the break, and of course, we will open up the lines for any of your questions. I know, Doc, you need to drink some water for this segment here. So
marathon session.
Yes, the marathon session. So we're going to take a quick break and we return with your question. You're listening to Independency live on 95.5 FM, live on the Independency Facebook page and YouTube channel. We'll be back.
You're listening to Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha. Reality radio at its best.
COVID-19 Conversations with PAHO. What is COVAX?
What this is a way to ensure that all countries can receive vaccine when it becomes available, and not just the country in which it's manufactured or the countries that can afford the most. That is the idea behind COVAX, so that all countries pay into COVAX or get funding to pay into the COVAX facility to purchase vaccine.
COVAX is a collaboration between CEPI, Gavi and WHO and the key partner UNICEF. Get the facts. Vaccinate, live. A message from the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization.
Give me my phone.
What you doing taking them kind of pictures? I'll tell mommy.
And I'll tell her you invaded my privacy.
Privacy? When you send those pics, you lose all privacy. It's like setting up a billboard with your naked pics for the world to see.
Those pictures are for my boyfriend's eyes only, and he'll never do that to me.
Yes, he can, or one of his friends or family. Or someone can steal his phone. Sending naked pics can open you up to embarrassment for you, your family, and friends. You can be harassed by bullies. Your pics can be uploaded to websites and seen by everybody, even the wrong people, sex offenders. It can also affect you getting a good job in the future. Once those pictures go out, you can never get them back.
Okay, I'll tell my boyfriend to delete them, and I'll delete these. I'm glad I have a smart little sister.
I'm still telling mommy.
I am Jason Clark, better known as the real chairman. I will be a guest on Eye on Dependency TV series Eye on Health every Sunday from 8:30 p.m. on TV6. Don't miss this important series, as I will be speaking about inclusion and advocacy for persons living with disability.
Hi, my name is Tanir Kane, trauma survivor and trauma-informed care expert from the state of Maryland, United States. And you're listening to Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography on I-95.5 FM, Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, folks. So before we take your calls, let's go to this as we observe or prepare to observe International Youth Day on August 12th. Let's start with this third place winner of the Civilian Conservation Corps Spoken Word competition that was put on by the Counter Trafficking Unit. This was the third place winner. Just 2 minutes, just take into this, and then we come back with your calls.
Real Men Don't Buy Women and Girls. Written by
Jada Ryan. Presented by me, Jada Ryan, representing the Civilian Conservation Corps, Central Region. You see, real men don't buy women and girls. You want to know the truth? This is the truth. There are lots of women and girls have been sold, abducted, missing, and been used for human trafficking. It is not something you can go out and buy in a store. God has placed women on this earth for a reason and a purpose. As a matter of fact, women came from man to be a helpmeet. They deserve the respect, love, and support, not to be ridiculed and treated for naught. This is a disease, wickedness in the worst way. To see such a demise can come upon anyone, much less women and girls being taken against their will without they saying the matter, walking on the street, sitting in a taxi, anywhere at any time. Even our girls not exempted from it. Taken, stolen from us, never to be seen again. Used for pleasure and entertainment. We are human beings with feelings, heart, and emotions, and at times strong. We are not a piece of land or cattle to be traded and trafficked at anyone's whims and fancy. We have to, must, and can stand against this injustice which has befallen us. We must rally around our nation. We need to stand up and break those barriers, knots, and chains, and take back our rights as humans. We are not animals for sale. We are human beings with values and morals. Let's fight against this evil act. Real men don't buy women and girls. Humans are not for sale. Break the silence. Break the chain.
622-3937, 622-3937. We take your calls now. If you have any questions for Dr. Franka Vignes, and keep your questions short, please, and succinct so that the doctor can answer and give everybody a chance. We go up to 8. Let's go. Roger Benito asks a nurse who wears a mask longer than that.
Correct.
And she will answer you the question. Hello, good evening.
Yes, good night, Garth and Natasha.
Good evening, sir.
And good night also to the goodly doctor. Doc, I have a question. The vaccines, why isn't anybody, both government and manufacturers, not taking liability for the vaccines? Because it seems as if if you're going to push a product like a vaccine, there should be liability from someone in case there's any adverse reaction to the vaccine.
All right.
I would really like somebody to answer that question for me, please.
All right. We will document your question and let's see how fast we could take the questions and then relax. Doctor, you there, right?
Yes. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you. Okay. Question number 2. Go ahead, caller. Hello. Good evening. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Your question for Dr. Vignes?
Yes, Dr. Vignes. There's a concern over a question. Right? This whole question, I hope I'm articulating myself properly. It comes from something that might be considered misinformation, disinformation, or conspiracy theory. In that, long before COVID was discovered in Wuhan, it was known, it was coming. Dr. Anthony Fauci mentioned that make no bones about it, this is going to happen. And we'll only return to a state of normalcy after the entire global population is vaccinated.
Your question?
Question is, the amount of vaccination being manufactured, and yet still there is no 100% efficacy. Right? I am baffled that we are at this stage now, and we are talking even now about mandatory vaccination. Please help me, Dr. Vignes.
So
All right. Thank you very much.
I'm guessing his question is why vaccine is going to be made mandatory if they're not 100% efficacy? I'm guessing that's his question.
Right. Question number 3, 622-3937. Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Wonderful program.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is related to blood types and COVID-19. Is it true that persons who have type O blood will not suffer the severe effects of COVID-19 because their blood type, it has levels of protein that will not promote blood clotting as much as the other blood types? And that type A was linked to a higher mortality risk than blood group O?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Good question. 622-3937. So, Doc, as I said, you are, of course, not compelled to, but if you are comfortable, then you can answer the question. The first one would be liability.
Absolutely. So the question was about liability for the vaccine. Now, the vaccine, in terms of answering that question, that would be a question best answered by the agency, the government that is administering the vaccine to its liability. So that is a question that is outside my area of expertise.
Right, good.
So that I cannot answer, but thank you so much for that question. It's a good one if you want to understand who is liable if anything goes wrong. So I think that's an excellent question. But again, that is not my area of expertise, and I am not equipped to answer that question on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So the next question, I believe,
is mandatory.
I was looking.
Why mandatory if the vaccines are not 100% or don't have 100% efficacy?
Yes, and I remember that caller. Thank you so much for your question, saying he did not quite understand why at this point there still isn't a vaccine that's 100% efficacious.
Yes.
Right. So the bottom line is this, sir: there is no vaccine ever produced or developed that has 100% efficacy. Okay, so that's the first thing. There's no vaccine with 100% efficacy, nor will there ever be a vaccine with 100% efficacy, where it reduces your likelihood of developing the disease that you're being vaccinated against to 0%. Okay, that's the first thing. The next question, part of his question was, why about mandatory? And I think that mandates for vaccines, why would it be mandatory if it is that you can still become infected, right? So that's going to be, watch this space. As you can see, there's a lot going on around vaccine mandates in the Caribbean as well as in abroad. And the question, to answer your question, is this. So when you're vaccinated, we reduce the risk. Remember, public health is about reducing risk. And when we are vaccinated, we reduce the risk of the entire population. So, for example, let's forget about COVID-19 a little bit. Let's look at measles. Let's look at mumps, rubella, polio. Why is it that we don't have transmission of these diseases, of these viruses, even though the efficacy of these vaccines is not 100%? The reason we have zero transmission of many of these diseases in Trinidad and Tobago specifically is because we have a high rate of vaccination. The virus has nowhere to go because we are all protected from infection. So then you ask the question, why have a mandate? So although vaccines are not 100% efficacious, we still have mandates for children going to school to have the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. We still have, mandates for persons to get the polio vaccine. Whether there'll be a mandate for COVID-19, that would be a question for countries, sovereign states to determine on their own. That's not something that PAHO or WHO can determine for countries. Sovereign states will determine that for themselves, and persons in the private sector companies will make that determination and do what is best for their businesses as well. So to answer your question, there is no vaccine that is 100% efficacious, nor will there ever be. So let me make sure you understand that.
Yes. Doc, okay. Now, this other question here I think was interesting, the blood type, the person who asked, and we have time for a couple more questions. You can call us 622-3937. Doc, the question about the blood type.
Yes.
I found that interesting.
Absolutely. I have not seen any published. I have to admit that early on in the pandemic, there was some discussion, I remember, around blood types and severity of illness. I have not seen anything published in a peer-reviewed journal or discussed around that. So I do not know the answer to that question. Right. In terms of, I have more information that you need to know. I have blood type O, and I got the vaccine. And I don't think that one or two, we don't know there's no published information on that. And so I don't believe that it should be a reason for us to hesitate to get vaccinated.
622-3937. Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, your question for Dr. Devines?
Could you speak up a little bit, sir?
Can you tell us what is the stage of the WHO's approval of the Cuban vaccine? And how soon can WHO expect to approve vaccines that were produced in Cuba? Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Doc, can you shed some light on that?
Thank you for that question. And as I mentioned, there are about 110 vaccines in clinical development, and there are vaccines that are currently being considered for emergency use listing, and there are several Cuban vaccines. So I don't know which vaccine specifically the gentleman was referring to, because there's several of them. But I know for a fact that one of them at least is being considered for emergency use listing by WHO, and WHO doesn't go out and seek these vaccines to approve. These vaccines, the manufacturers or governments must submit the information that's required. And again, as I mentioned, for early use listing, what has to be done, you have to show that it's safe, that it's efficacious, and that it can be manufactured in large quantities, meaning millions and millions of doses can be manufactured at high quality. And of course, the information must be made available to WHO as well. So to answer your question, I do not know when the Cuban vaccine will be approved or given early emergency use listing.
Right.
But it is being considered. I know at least one Cuban vaccine is on the list of vaccines being considered.
Right, Doc. Some women find out they observe in some jurisdictions people administering vaccines with gloves, and then some jurisdictions they are not. Are they necessary, or
is there a standard that should be applied when administering vaccines?
In terms of I would leave that's a policy decision.
Right.
And that's a policy that the Trinidad and Tobago Ministry of Health would have to provide guidance on. I don't know what the policy is here, and that question would be best directed to the ministry.
Right.
Okay.
Right, so we have time for one more question. Let's take one more question. Go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I listened to the doctor, some of her points on thing, and she was talking about all these other vaccines like yellow fever and all these other stuff on it. But these vaccines have been tested and proven, because I don't know anybody who take yellow fever vaccine and get yellow fever and thing after. I took it a few years ago, and you see these vaccines, these COVID vaccines, I agree they have the technology to make it fast, but everything is time to test vaccine. That is why the doctor cannot answer a lot of questions, because they don't have it. They're just using the word as a test lab. They're supposed to test these things over time. You can't skip time with testing. You have to make it safe for the public. And, for people to be safe, that's why all the vaccine hesitancy, people hearing and seeing a lot of things. So they have to do all the testing.
I hear you.
There's nothing without testing.
So you're concerned about the speed with which these vaccines are being delivered?
Yes.
All right. Thanks very much for sharing that, sir.
Thank you so much for that question, and I think that's a legitimate concern many persons have.
Yeah.
And I've heard that before, are we being used as guinea pigs and all that sort of thing. Remember that the vaccines, none of the COVID-19 vaccines are licensed. That is a fact, okay? Again, in the clinical trials, they were found to be safe, they were found to work, and for those manufacturers companies given early use listing, emergency use listing, or emergency use authorization, they have been found to be able to manufacture the vaccines in high numbers, in large quantities, at high quality. Of course, we would want to do more tests. Of course, we want to establish safety even further. However, we are in a public health emergency. And that is why the vaccines were given emergency use listing. We're in a public health emergency. Over 4 million persons have succumbed to the COVID-19, and those are the persons that have been reported. We have economies are in shambles. Children are out of school. People cannot travel. People haven't seen their loved ones for months or years, now going into 2 years. So there's a lot going on, and it's been considered to be a global emergency. And that is why the emergency use listing was why these vaccines were given emergency approval, because we are in an emergency. And I totally agree with the gentleman who called in. Of course, we must continue to examine safety as we go forward as well. That will never stop. We will continue. Vaccine manufacturers must do that. They have to. However, as I mentioned, if the benefits the benefits outweigh the risks, then they are given emergency use. And I can only say because we're in an emergency. But that is an excellent question, and I know that's a concern that many persons have.
Yes.
And, but we have to consider as well, as of July 1st, there have been nearly 3 billion vaccine doses that have been administered. 3 billion doses.
Yep.
And that's July 1st. We're now in mid-August. So as I said, you have to weigh the benefits and the risk. Yes. And just imagine, I think from my perspective, had we not received emergency use listing or emergency use authorization for any of these vaccines, where would we be today?
I hear you, Doc. I hear you. And Doc, before we go, somebody wants to know about varicose veins. If you have varicose veins, can you take the vaccine still?
I think I can't answer that question. I don't see. Let's say see your physician or your doctor to get that. To be advised about that. I'm not sure. I don't see any reason why not. But I think it's always best to.
Well, as you say, when in doubt, check your physician, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Any final words for us, Doc, as we are a bit over time, but any final words for our audience this evening?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, and I want to thank the audience, the listening public and the viewing public, those on Facebook, for their time. And just to say that we must continue to practice the public health social measures. People are probably tired of hearing it, but we have to continue to mask, use hand hygiene and social distancing. I hope more persons better understand that vaccinations reduce the risk of severe illness.
Doc, could you hold 1 second for me, please?
Yes, of course.
I'm short, man. Put up the pictures of the people at the park place again, please.
Yes.
And I want you to speak to these people too, Doc. Speak to our population. Look at them. This is not social distancing, right? Can you see this?
Yes, I can.
Right. This is not social distancing, right?
No, it's not.
Thank you very much. Could you again speak to our population as all the health doing over the past months? Could you just reiterate again how important social distancing is, please? It's getting very scary out there for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we open up more and more, I think retail stores will be opening up very soon. More of us will be up and about, and it's inevitable. As we open up more, we'll just have there'll be the opportunity for more to transmission of more and an increase in cases. That's just the nature of the virus, right? More people are up and about, there are more opportunities for the virus to be transmitted from one person to the other. So it's really important that we maintain, social distancing, as we've been talking about earlier. I just want to say to persons, if you don't want or you've chosen not to get vaccinated, because you believe you might have a mild infection or be asymptomatic, know that you can still transmit the disease, So I ask you, just think of one person that you love and who loves you and who is worth protecting. Get it for a parent or children who cannot get vaccinated, because we are all that they have in terms of protecting them. So if it is that you are thinking, well, if I get it, I'll be fine, you probably might be fine. Okay, many persons get asymptomatic or mild infections, so you could be fine, but you could possibly transmit it to another person. And there's growing evidence now that being vaccinated, even if you are infected, that you are asymptomatic and less likely to transmit the virus. There's a growing body of evidence to show that as well. So I say to the audience, do your research, ask questions, please reject the stories and the disinformation when people share stories that are beyond the pale.
Yes.
Don't even share it, because, somebody's going to believe. You might think it's laughable, but someone might believe it. So let's raise the level of the discourse. Let's ensure that our conversations and discussions on the vaccine, we discuss the science, but let's get to the heart of the matter to better understand each other's fears. There are persons who are hesitant to get vaccinated for good reason. It's okay to be afraid of needles, but get vaccinated anyway. All right?
Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much for your time. You've been wonderful. And God bless you all and continue, give you health and strength to continue the good work that you're doing here. And we remind our listeners that the PAHO Marathon continues this evening at 8:30. Join Dr. Erica Wheeler and 3 persons living with disabilities as they continue to that part of advocacy too in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
It's going to be a very interesting 1-hour show of PAHO on TV6 this evening at 8:30 and 8:45 on our YouTube channel. Dr. Vignes, Franka
Thank you
Vignes,
again.
thank you again.
Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.
Same to you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, folks, that's it.
That's
We've got to
it.
leave. We run out of time, as usual. And Natasha, thank you very much. Kerr, Shortman, thank you all so much. Those of you on Facebook, I'm sure someone from PAHO will answer your questions. So.
And I have to give a plug to the NLCB machines are opening tomorrow, so please remember, don't play all. Winning is not everything. For those of you who have a problem with gambling, please reach out for help.
Thank you, folks. Have a good evening. Be safe out there.
Good night.
Good night.
Eye on Dependency. Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography. On the Eye, 95.5.